It's finally here, the MSI Cubi AMD Ryzen Mini PC. Thanks to many requests from you guys, MSI unveiled its Ryzen-based Cubi and Claw handheld at Computex 2025, after having stuck solely with Intel CPUs. This new model is known as the Cubi Z AI8M, or Z depending on your region, but I'm going to refer to it as the Cubi Z, since I'm Australian, damn it, and we hate long names. The Cubi Z retains the same high quality plastic shell and metal plate underneath as found in the Intel version and looks suitably businesslike, which is unsurprising as that's the target market. MSI says the Cubi Z is fit for 24/7 use and has a longer warranty to back up that claim. Isn't that nice? I think it's nice. The Z features processors up to the Ryzen 8945HS. But inside this review unit is AMD's Ryzen 8845HS, which is only slightly worse, and basically the same 8-core 16-thread CPU with Radeon 780M graphics as the newer generation Ryzen H260 mobile CPU, since that's just a refresh. So what that means is the Cubi Z is still current as of this review, even though business units typically tend to be a generation or two behind. Accessories are similar to previous Cubis with a VESA mount and 19.5 volt 120 watt power supply. While not the most compact we've seen, it isn't one of the big chunky ones either. Unfortunately, the unique external power button is missing in action, which is a shame since it's a real draw card for those mounting their Mini on the back of a monitor. The power port is still on the Mini itself, so are you meant to buy this separately or something? MSI, please bring it back with every box. I usually quote US pricing since that's where the majority of this channel's audience is located, but since I couldn't find it on both Amazon and Newegg, we're going with Australian computer retailers instead. The cheapest one I found is $680 for the barebones, which is approximately $480 US. Barebones requires RAM, storage, and OS installation. Ports include 4 USB-A 10GB on the front, as well as a 3.5mm audio jack and power button. Inside is a MediaTek Wi-Fi 6E card for wireless and Bluetooth. There's a full-sized SD card reader on the left side and the external power switch slot on the right, while the other port is a Kensington lock. The back has 2 USB 4 ports, both 40GB and supporting display. The left one also allows you to power the mini PC via USB-C monitor. There's dual Realtek 2.5GB LAN, a USB-A 10GB, and USB 2. Last but not least, we have dual HDMI. A new addition to the Cubi Z is the internal speaker, which you can see under the bottom lid, and I have to say it wins the prize for worst sound quality from any mini PC with a speaker I've reviewed so far, which isn't that many actually, but still the point remains. The speaker is very quiet, sounds tinny, and has limited usefulness, especially in a louder environment. Something that hasn't been added is some form of cooling for the undercarriage. A thermal pad for the SSD connecting to the metal lid would have been nice. So we'll see how the RAM and SSD hold up later. Also, there's only one M.2 Gen 4 NVMe slot, which limits your storage options to, well, just the one. Windows 11 Pro is pre-installed on this review unit, but it'll depend on the vendor, or if it's bare bones, you can install what you like, which includes Linux. I tested Ubuntu and it worked just fine, wireless, Bluetooth, and all. The reason this review is late is that the performance on the eGPU side was subpar when I started testing it. I passed on the feedback to MSI and received a BIOS update, which fixed the issue. This process took a while, but the BIOS I was sent early and will soon go up on the support page as the first BIOS of 2026 improves graphics performance by as much as almost 10%, bringing the Cubi Z in line with the competition. Oh, and it also adds a performance mode which wasn't available previously. Don't worry, I tested it as well. So let's start with Cinebench single core. The MSI Cubi Z performs fine when comparing to another mini PC with the 8845HS CPU. Multi-core out of the box is below the Mini's Forum UM880 Plus, and with performance mode, still doesn't get there. Taking the best scores, the Mini's Forum is ahead by 3%. Geekbench single core is very similar to the Minis forum. In Geekbench multi-core, the QBZ is ahead because the Minis forum only had 1 stick of RAM. When I added 2 and enabled its performance mode, the score ends up being almost identical to the best MSI result. In the short H.264 encoding test, both performance modes took the same time to complete. The Minis forum cut down encoding time by an extra 6 seconds with its best result, a few percent gain there. The AV1 encoding test is a similar benchmark, but using a different codec and takes much longer to complete. The Minis forum really cuts down the time with its best result, beating the QBZ by almost 10%. For the final video encoding test, we let the iGPU take care of most of the heavy workload for the same AV1 encode. Here, the QBZ pretty much matches the Minis forum when it has 2 sticks of RAM. Due to space constraints on the chart, the AI CPU test shows only the best result. Here, the Minis forum does a bit better, but they aren't too far apart. And the AI GPU test shows the two are almost identical. Onto the 3D Mark tests, and now after the updated BIOS, the QBZ is performing similarly to the other Minis with Radeon 780M. It's still a little bit behind though, and interestingly, the performance mode always resulted in a better score. So if we compare the best scores, the Minis forum is 2% ahead in Firestrike, almost 3% in TimeSpy, and just 1.5% in Steel Nomad Lite. So overall, pretty close there. My first question after benchmarking was, does the RAM overheat when pushed? This was a problem with early AMD Ryzen mini PCs using DDR5, as reported on this channel, and would absolutely throttle GPU performance. In this case, happy to report the answer is no. In fact, I left it on Cyberpunk 2077 for half an hour in 30 degrees Celsius ambient Australian summer heat. Not only did it not drop a frame, but the hottest RAM module maxed out at just 62C. That's far from throttling territory. How's that possible? Well, the Cubi draws air in from the bottom, which passes by the RAM and exits out the rear. Okay, onto the game tests. AMD's Radeon 780M doesn't automatically turn your mini PC into a gaming machine, but at its launch, it was a big leap forward for integrated graphics. A lot of esports games play at high frame rates at 1080p. AAA games from a few years ago run decently. But newer ones don't hold up. Any mobile chip with AMD's Radeon 780M makes for a good emulation box. But if you really want to increase your GPU power, you're best off using an external graphics card with a USB 4 port. Even with its limited bandwidth, you get a much better experience with a decent graphics card. The Linux kernel compile benchmark has the MSI QBZ as an okay performer. The Minis forum at best managed to shave off a few more seconds. Adobe Photoshop performance is also decent, and this time the QBZ came out ahead. There are just a couple of minis with similar CPUs that managed a slightly better score. Not in Adobe Premiere though, where the QBZ was a top performing 8-core Ryzen CPU. Even though there's very little chance you'll be using this SSD, I benchmarked it anyway, and the Phison performed really well for a Gen 4 NVMe. However, with its lack of cooling, it gets too hot under load even with the airflow from the undercarriage. MSI needs to add a thermal pad into the kit to help dissipate the heat. A maximum temp of 73C for the drive is easily thermal throttling territory, as the controller will be much higher. And incidentally, thermal throttling on the SSD is what I witnessed when putting the CPU and SSD under load for longer periods. In the Bluetooth range test, we have a new winner. This QBZ was able to sustain music playback on my portable speaker at 10.5 meters, or just over 34 feet. Impressive. And unsurprisingly, wireless tested at 12 meters or 39 feet from the router using the 5G band worked fine with no dropouts. An idle power draw of 8 watts is good, and the maximum is pretty standard, around the 90 watt mark from the wall with a default setting, and around 100 watts with a performance mode enabled. Maximum CPU temperature under load is on the higher side. Performance mode allows the Mini to hit 95°C before thermal throttling, and also introduces more fan noise. Fan noise is a bit more complicated than what we usually see. Once the QBZ settles down, it's very quiet at idle. But it's a very trigger happy fan curve and can ramp up with slight increases in processor use, which is pretty common in Windows, which does whatever it wants without asking you beforehand, with its various background processes. In that case, fan noise will ramp up. However, it's only under load that it'll hit 44 dBA out of the box, which is definitely above average or the median, whatever you want to use. And then on top of that, the performance mode adds another extra 5 dBA for the slight performance gains we saw in the charts. As almost always the case, I don't think it's worth the trade-off. At 0.9 liters in volume, this is quite a big boy in mini PC land, but doesn't have the big boy feature like dual M.2 NVMe slots. The delete key on startup will get you into the BIOS. Those hoping for a fancy GUI like with the Intel-based Cubi NUCs will be disappointed. Anyway, in advanced you'll find the fan mode, which also doubles as the power mode. There's restore on AC power loss, and the iGPU VRAM limit can be changed. Unfortunately, I don't see Wake on LAN. Overall, this is a pretty limited BIOS option-wise, with no option to tweak the fan curve. And with all that out of the way, let's hit the mini PC checklist. While MSI's Cubi NUC Z doesn't come with an all-metal case, the build quality is excellent. I think the price for the bare bones here in Oz is reasonable for what you get. While the power supply isn't massive, it's not as compact as we see with other brands. And there are plenty of features included minus Oculink. The MSI Cubis have always been easy to open as they follow the Intel NUCs, which got it right from the get-go. None of that glued on rubber feet nonsense. The pre-build came with a max memory speed configuration, which is always good to see, and I was surprised to see only one M.2 SSD slot, limiting your storage options. Performance is pretty good, especially after the BIOS update, and my only real complaint is the lack of SSD cooling, since RAM held up fine. I'm confident a thermal pad connecting the SSD to the metal plate would solve the issue, as it has with other brands. Bluetooth range is excellent and wireless had no problems. For load fan noise, anything above 40 dBA gets across, and the QBZ is louder out of the box than most. Latency Mon complained there could be dropouts during audio production, so that's across there. MSI does provide BIOS updates and all the drivers you need to get the Mini up and running from the bare bones model. I think the QBZ needs a couple more options in the BIOS, such as Wake on LAN and a way to set your own fan curve. There's no exterior CMOS reset button, but with the limited BIOS options, it's not needed. MSI backs this Mini with an industry-leading 3-year warranty and qualifies it for 24/7 use. What's not to like? It shows commitment to reliability. There it is, the first AMD Ryzen Mini PC from MSI, known as the Cubi NUC Z AI8M. It does many things right for the first outing. We've gone over what can be improved, including SSD cooling, load fan noise, BIOS options, and another M.2 slot. Oh, and please bundle the external power button with each unit. You might be wondering, well, what about the Intel-based Cubi NUC AI1UMG? How does that compare? Well, I didn't even bother putting the two side by side, since the difference in performance is so large that it's an easy win for the QBZ. Oh, and it's also cheaper than the Intel Mini, so slam dunk. Maybe that will change with Intel's upcoming Panther Lake, maybe not, we'll see. As you may have noticed, these in-depth reviews take a ton of time, so help support the channel by doing your shopping with the links below every time you buy from those stores. It makes a huge difference at no cost to you. To finish up, if you still want a Cubi mini PC with an Intel CPU, then don't let me stop you from watching my review of it right here. Cheers!